All right, everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, where we don't just talk to solar CEOs, we talk to the people keeping the solar systems running. I'm your host, Yarek, and today we're going to be talking about what happens after solar gets installed. So today, I have the pleasure of being with Paul West, the founder of Peak Solar Pro, a New England-based solar maintenance company that specializes in panel washing, vegetation management, and preventative O&M for utility-scale commercial and residential sites. So anywhere from snow removal on solar farms to bird control systems to imaging. Yeah, that's the real thing. Sorry, Paul, give me a bit of a break here. How do I pronounce this? Electroluminescence imaging. That's amazing. And it's a real thing. So Paul and his team make sure solar arrays keep producing clean power year round. So let's get into it, Paul. Thanks for helping me out there. But how you doing today?
Great, Yannick.
That's fantastic. No, we're excited to kind of get into this because most people associate, with their solar installation with incentives, and your business tackles the next phase, which is more so focused at performance. So why did you choose to focus on, solar maintenance over the typical route of installation?
Yeah, that's a good question. For one thing, I don't have any experience in installation. So my background is actually in the maintenance field since I was in high school, uh, 35 years or so.
Hmm.
So I've worked on rooftops. I've been involved in building maintenance, window cleaning industry, all kinds of aspects of safety. So when I combined them all, it fit really nicely with maintaining solar systems and making sure that they work at their peak efficiency.
That's huge. And I mean, what's something that the average solar owner, whether residential or commercial, completely underestimates about the importance of maintenance?
It is, and it's probably easier, or I should say, more noticeable in areas that are dustier or perhaps get less rain, such as the Southwest or even down in Texas, Florida areas where they almost have to wash their solar panels. But here in the Northeast, it's a bit more ignored, I guess you could say.
Enough.
It's not as needed visually. A lot of times people don't think that it's as needed, but we run into lots of different maintenance issues when panels aren't cleaned.
Fair enough. And I mean, I know that you operate all across New England. What kind of region-specific challenges? So, like you mentioned, there's a little bit of it, but weather, vegetation, wildlife, those things that you focus on. What problems do your clients face that people in Arizona or California might not even think of? I know you kind of touched on it, but just to elaborate a little bit more to really get a good glimpse into the need for it.
That's a good question, Eric. So depending on which side of our business you look at, if you look at the panel washing side, panel washing in the Northeast is very different than a very dry climate because we're dealing with humidity, mold. Um, in the coastal areas, we deal with a lot of birds, so seagull droppings, nesting, algae, lichen, things that they might not deal with in drier climates. In industrial areas, which are everywhere, we deal with carbon deposits, whatever comes out of roof vents, if it's an industrial building, just, really nasty stuff that gets on the solar panels. On the
Fair enough.
vegetation side, of course, it's more seasonal. So it depends on rain and weather. We prevent, by maintaining the vegetation and mowing, we prevent the weeds from growing up into the panels and disrupting the service or the tracker systems or even growing up over the panels and shading them so you lose efficiency.
Fair enough. I think that's a big component to talk about because you hear a lot of buzz about installing. You hear a lot of bunch of I guess attention brought towards actually getting, new product installed. But, the maintenance side kind of gets, overlooked a lot of the time. And I mean, you've innovated quite a bit in the industry. I mean, your services aren't just like a brush and bucket. You've mentioned using, robotic washing equipment, EL cameras, PV soiling monitors, and even laser bird deterrents. How do you decide when and where to, deploy this tech?
That's an interesting question. So On the panel washing side, we decide how to approach it depending on the setup. So, for example, if we're going to clean solar carports or canopies, we're going to use our robotic system because it can crawl the top of the panels, and it's the easiest, most efficient, best way to clean canopy systems. Sometimes we do that on commercial rooftop systems too. Use the robot. Other times we use a manual brush or even a rotary brush, one that spins and is powered by in different ways depending on the type of brush.
Hmm. That's massive. And where did all this tech kind of come from? Is this like a huge innovation or has this been around for a long time?
Well, the solar cleaning robots, there's probably 6 or 8 big companies, only 6 or 8 big companies that make solar cleaning robots in the world. Of that, they're not all in the United States. Um, so the one that we happen to use is from Robsys out of Turkey and Germany.
Hmm.
It's a great robot for our system, but there are others. But yeah, it's been an emerging market, the robot market, and we just use them. We don't invent them.
Fair enough. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of that comes with like a pretty big investment. So is there maybe something that you invested a lot of or like a big tech investment that your company made that, completely changed how you do business?
It does. I mean, it makes us more efficient using the robot for sure. Um, but it's also a lot safer in a number of scenarios. We don't need to get near edges of roofs by any means. The robot will do it for us. And then carports, like I said, makes a big difference.
Fair enough. That's huge. That's amazing. I mean, you've also been certified by the International Solar Cleaning Academy and you work with, next gen PV, like the soiling mitigation. What does that training enable you to do that maybe others might not be able to?
Yeah, so the ISCA International Solar Cleaning Academy is run by a gentleman out of the UK named Steve Williams, um, and he's been in the cleaning industry for a long time, and he came up with the idea of the academy, and so I got involved with him, and I attended his first classes, and then the first convention that he put on for the solar cleaning industry in the United States, which was last year in
Mm,
Las Vegas. Then I worked closely with Carla Dawson, who's an engineer who invented Soiler.tech, and she's the one that specializes in next gen PV maintenance management, soiling issues, if you will.
that's huge. And I mean, I know a lot of the maintenance work in the industry is kind of subbed out or, bundled with other services. How do you position Peak Solar Pro as a dedicated and, specialized O&M partner?
Yeah, well, that's constantly changing. Sometimes there's companies that only want one site done. And then sometimes there's companies that will have entire bid packages with hundreds of sites that they'll ask to be done.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're in a smaller geographical region. Other times I've been asked to bid on packages that span across the United States.
Wow.
So it's the industry is changing, and I would say it's almost condensing, solidifying itself, and it's going to come more under one roof in the coming years.
Exactly. I mean, we hope so. I mean, there's a lot of great movements happening, and we won't talk about the policy today, but I definitely think that there's definitely a huge opening in the market for any kind of innovation, and I think maintenance is going to be huge. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. So, kind of as a pioneer, almost in the space, what are you expecting to see in the next couple of years?
As far as new innovations,
New
well,
innovations, and maybe even the future of of solar, and how your business fits into that.
yeah, I mean, there's so much developing technologies. I try to keep up with it, but a lot of times we don't really know what's going to happen in the coming years with solar. as far as advances in technology and efficiency and different materials I read about that they're going to use and how that'll impact maintenance and cleaning and whatnot. Grass will
Hmm.
never stop growing, and
Exactly.
dirt will keep coming. So I'm sure that somewhere in there, we'll rise to meet the needs as they present themselves. The biggest thing that we focus on in our company is to keep myself and the employees safe.
Hmm.
So safe when they're cleaning, and then the second focus is to keep the solar panels safe. So
Hmm.
to make sure that
Exactly.
the anti-reflective coating isn't getting damaged in any way with any type of cleaning equipment or chemicals that we use, and that it helps the system stay performing at its peak efficiency for the life of the unit.
Exactly. That's huge. I think that's a big thing is, extending the longevity of it. But you also mentioned, keeping people safe and keeping panels safe. And I think that comes down to the leadership that you have because your site mentions that leadership is directly involved, in your daily operations. Why is that important to your business model and how do your crews respond to it?
Yeah, I mean, we're not big enough that I'm not involved. I founded Peak Solar Pro, and I come from the field. Oftentimes, I still work in the field with the different crews. I enjoy the hands-on work. I'm not a behind the desk type of person. I'm surprised I'm even here on the podcast with you. Came from the field this morning. Um, but the crews like it when an owner operator is involved, especially when we keep our focus on safety. They just
Mhm. Exactly.
just
That's
runs, it
massive.
permeates throughout the company. Yeah.
That's huge. And is there other people kind of stepping up into leadership roles, maybe also embodying those qualities that you have?
In our company,
Yes.
yeah, I would say my different crew managers, they try to follow my lead in making sure that we're safe, making sure that everybody that's with them has on the proper PPE every time and goes through the safety checklist when they arrive on site, go through their JHA, job hazard analysis, try and see if there's any challenges. Yeah.
That's huge. I love that. And, with such a field focused operation, I'd say, how do you scale across, 6 states without really losing any service quality?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Fortunately, the New England states are smaller. So we have really focused on the New England states for our company. Um, and so you can drive across all the areas that we work in within a few hours
Hmm.
of time. If we scale up at some point and take on a coast to coast approach, then of course we're going to have other safety minded companies, come aboard and be part of that contract to service those clients.
Exactly. And is that part of the growth plan? Is that something that you're seeing or planning to do in the future?
Yeah, we started talking about it this year only because we were noticing more and more companies taking on these national contracts of all different sorts. That some of the big solar companies we work with um, have upwards of 1,000 sites. Uh,
Hmm.
I can think of one, in fact, one large company that just on the East Coast, one of the managers was telling me they have over 500 solar farms on the ground, in addition to rooftop installation projects that they maintain. So some of those contracts are big, big,
Of
uh,
course.
geographically and a big maintenance contract.
Exactly, fair enough. And do they
Yeah.
tend to split those up sometimes between a bunch of different companies, or in your experience, is it usually just one company that, wins the entire proposal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say what I've seen so far in our industry is that they've been split up between different companies simply because there has been no national company that has risen to the occasion and been able to come up with a way to service coast to coast.
Hmm.
Some have tried. Some companies have. Like I can think of one on the West Coast, a pretty dominant company that tried doing it in-house in the areas where there were so many sites close together, and then they were subcontracting out the sites that were farther away from their base in California. So that's how we came on board with that company. But I think behind the scenes, which you probably know more about than me, it seems like the industry is constantly changing and constantly evolving, and I think it will continue to do so when the focus turns more towards maintaining these sites and not so much building them.
Exactly. I think it's going to be huge. There's so many things in the news. There's so much buzz out there that, it's almost impossible to predict what's going to be happening. But one thing that's for sure is these are going to keep getting installed. This is genuinely such a huge movement. And, with anything, there's always going to be maintenance, right? The more cars we've made, the more mechanics we had, right? So it's gonna apply the exact same way. So I kind of want to talk about actually where, the service really came in and shined. So, without naming any names, can you walk us through a project where, you had a solar array that was underperforming until your team stepped in?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I could think of one where I got some direct feedback from the solar company last year. It was a solar field, so a utility scale solar field in Providence, Rhode Island. It was set on a river in a very industrial area between two large oil refinery storage type places. So the air kind of permeated in like oily, dirty, greasy soot, I guess you could
Yes,
say.
fair
I
enough.
didn't test it, so I don't know exactly what it was, but it turned the solar panels black.
Wow.
And in a job site like that, most solar farms that I have experienced in the Northeast, they don't have water. That's one of the challenges. So we end up having to truck the water in on an 18 wheeler, about 5 to 7,000 gallons at a time. We have a company drop us basically an 18 wheeler, the back of an 18 wheeler, a tank.
Yeah.
And then when we run out of water, they fill it up.
Wow.
On a site like that, where it was not a big site overall, but for the Northeast, good size, about 10,000 panels. Um, After we finished cleaning it, the manager of that solar site called me up and said they immediately saw a jump in the performance for those panels. So they were happy that they got them cleaned.
It's amazing. Do you know the numbers of those off the top of your head?
I don't, yeah, I don't really keep track of that because we just clean when we're asked to clean.
Fair
And
enough.
some of the companies I've heard do it based on data that they gather in their offices, and of course they're located everywhere because everything's done on computer. Others I've heard recently are deciding to clean when they do drone inspections, and they
Mm,
can see from the drone inspections that the panels are dirty. And
exactly.
so we've had calls only because somebody went there, did a drone inspection, and said we need to get those cleaned.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I mean, speaking of that, you offer aerial imaging, you offer the hotspot detection and all the risk assessments. How often do you discover things, that clients had no idea were happening?
Yeah, so we don't do that in-house. We contract it out with a person that I work with in the Mid-Atlantic states and travels around and does them. But they have the technology where the drone can pick up on hot spots and see things that are going on just by a flyover, and then
Hmm.
identify issues in the solar panels and replace panels as needed just from the drone inspection.
That's huge. And on average, how big are some of these jobs that are being inspected? How many panels, how many acres? Not necessarily the wattage of the systems, but how long does it also take to, do a general clean?
Take that long. Most of the sites here in the Northeast, he can do in about a day.
Wow.
A bigger site in the Northeast might range around two to 300 acres. So they're not the same size as sites out in the, western part of the United States by any means.
Fair enough. And then when it comes to the cleaning side of things and, cleaning up debris and, even if there is vegetation involved, how long does that process usually take on a 3 to 500 acre farm?
Well, we don't maintain any that are that big. So most of our farms are closer to maybe the 20 to 50 acre size,
Hmm.
and they can range anywhere between a couple of days to just over a week, especially on the first cut.
Fair
So on our
enough.
vegetation maintenance management, we try to get the site owners to commit to 3 cuts per year. So
Hmm.
it's not like maintaining a golf course by any means. You're just trying to knock down the vegetation, make sure there's no shading, uh, make sure it doesn't grow up into the systems because weeds grow fast. And then lastly, make sure that any service providers that come on site and need to do repairs can access the panels
Of
effectively,
course.
and they're not walking through, 5 or 6 feet of weeds to get somewhere. So
Fair enough.
yeah, most of our sites, I would say, take between 3 to 5, 7 days.
That's great. I love that. And I mean, is this strictly the industrial side that, or the utility scale side that you're doing, or are you touching on a little bit of residential, maybe like smaller side commercial?
Yeah, we do some residential, not mowing by any means, um, but we do some residential panel cleaning, of course. Our area for doing residential is much smaller. We stay within 2 hours of our office.
Of
So it's mostly
course.
Massachusetts, in and around the Boston area.
That makes sense. And what's the ideal, client profile now then? Like who, gets it when it comes to maintenance and who still needs some convincing?
As far as the commercial or residential?
Let's do both.
Well, residential, it's interesting because, there's two sides to the residential cleaning market, I would say. There's the homeowner that doesn't like the way dirty panels look. So it's more of an aesthetic thing, like if you would have your house washed. They don't want to have dirty, filthy, you know, dirt covered solar panels on their roof. Uh,
Exactly.
so there's people that actually do it so they look nice. Then there's the ones that understand that they do need to be maintained. That even though they might have been sold originally on the idea that solar is installed and you never have to do anything to it for 30 years, they they learn a little bit down the road that that's not necessarily true, that there is some maintenance to taking
Exactly.
care of your solar projects.
That makes sense. And
On
what
the
about the
commercial side,
commercial?
it's pretty much a it's pretty much a relationship driven waiting game. So I form a relationship with somebody on the commercial side. We do a site for them, or maybe a couple of sites for them. We try to get them to commit to a contract and maybe depending on the site, take care of it once a year. Uh, there are a few select sites I have where we do them up to 3 times a year, especially
Hmm.
ones that have bird issues.
Course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a huge problem. And, I kind of want to move over into, the customer side as well, but, how you're getting the word out there because, most solar, I want to say marketing is about, installation and incentives, but you're in a more like invisible, but a very critical part of the ecosystem. So how do you sell that and how do you tell that story to potential new customers?
Yeah, it's been interesting learning more about how to acquire and communicate with and find out who the decision makers are in these big solar companies. So I go to the different solar shows like RE Plus. I get to meet people and shake hands. I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So I meet a lot of people in the solar industry on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then just phone calls and referrals and cold calling and anything I can do to meet somebody in the solar industry and promote. our business in the area that we work seems to work. But it's
Fair
an
enough.
uphill
And do you
battle,
have a
I'll
team?
tell you that much.
I believe it. Do you have a team doing any of the cold calling or any of the outreach, or is that all you?
I do it all myself. Yep.
That's amazing. So I guess you somewhat enjoy it.
I do. I do. You know, I don't sit around all day and do it by any means, but I take some time. You know, winter in New England is cold, and we basically don't do anything unless we go out and remove snow.
Exactly.
So we have a lot more time in the winter, which is when we really focus on attending our conferences and reaching out proactively to possible new clients.
Fair enough. I mean, you hear a lot of, installers specifically, resorting to ads or even like emails. Is that something that's ever been, on your radar or potentially coming across it?
It, what was that question again?
Like you see a lot of installers going towards, running ads or doing entire automated campaigns. Is that something that, you've really thought about, bringing into your business as well? Fair enough. I think it's something to look into for you because there's a lot of good things going on. But in terms of looking ahead now, if you could show every solar asset owner, one before and one visual after, so like a before and after, walk us through some of the craziest and most influential one, apart from maybe the one with the black smog as we heard about. But what would that look like?
As far as a before and after cleaning.
Exactly, yes.
Oh, um, well, if you went on my website, you'd see amazing pictures of before and after cleanings. I think probably the most drastic one that is easy to see in photographs is places that are bombarded by birds,
Yes.
because the solar panels go from looking, nice and black or blue, depending on the type of solar panel, to just like a chalky, messy, muddy, grayish white.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that there's a major problem here. And then when they're clean, they're like brand new.
Fair enough. That's amazing. So I mean, I guess looking forward now, like for the next, couple years, are there any new technologies or practices that you're excited to kind of adopt over the next few years?
Yeah, there's boy, that touches on some stuff that's brand new. I'm actually involved in the development of a couple of really unique cleaning equipment things in the industry. For example, we came up with a lot of solar panels out there across the nation are cleaned with water-fed poles, which is
Hmm.
basically traditionally a carbon fiber type of pole where water runs up it and runs out the brush. The problem with carbon fiber poles is that they conduct electricity,
True.
and
Yes.
solar panels, when they're installed right and there's no shorts, aren't going to have any problems. But if they do, it's a potential huge hazard.
Hmm.
So I've been working with a gentleman that patented a new kind of pole that is non-conductive. Been
Okay.
tested. I believe he has it tested right now up to 35,000 volts, which is huge. And we're going to release that pole to the solar cleaning industry next month.
That's
Was
pretty
actually
big.
using the prototype in the field today, and it's quite awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's huge. And where can people go to find any more information about what you do and your entire company?
In my company, they can go to my website, peaksolarpro.com. Yep.
Wonderful. Perfect. Well, I want to wrap this up quickly and give a big thanks to Paul West for joining us and breaking down the essential but also often overlooked side of solar energy. So, whether it's snow removal, bird control, or just keeping those panels spotless and productive, Peak Solar Pro is making sure New England solar investment performs at its peak. So, learn more about his work, like he said, at peaksolarpro.com. And follow us on LinkedIn on Spot and Spotify for more episodes like this. So until next time, keep your panels clean and your insights charged. So take care, everybody, and thank you, Paul, once again for joining us.
Thank you, Yark. My pleasure.